Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is September 18th, 2020, and we're on episode 96
Woohoo!
of Transmission, where we're going to do, Dan and I are joking, but maybe it'll become a thing of doing a Fascism Friday. The alliteration is too, Dan likes numeric symmetry. I like literary symmetry, so.
Yeah, that's good too.
Good,
yeah. And, we're closing in on that big episode number 100. It's hard to believe.
I know.
So you can start writing out those giant donation checks.
They grow
with
up
lots of zeros.
To introduce ourselves, I'm Mark Van Steenwyk. I'm the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Daniel Wolpert. I direct MICA, the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing.
And we were, just beforehand, we were talking about fascism protests, and it's interesting. I mean, it's only a couple of months ago that George Floyd was murdered, right?
Well, more than a couple. No, it's the end of May. So June, July, August, September, 4 months.
Okay, wow.
4 months.
But, Dan lives like a block away from where that happened. I live a mile to the north. And we've seen all these waves of, just talking about white liberals for a second, which is my favorite thing to talk about. People like jumping on the Black Lives Matter, quoting MLK saying riots are the voice of the unheard, language of the unheard. Then buildings started burning, but like, well, let's
no.
and then it's like, you know what? White supremacist infiltrators did all this to kind of this continual wave of, the city was willing to consider some alternative to policing, like defunding the police. Now those same people are talking about, well, maybe what really needs to happen is we need to increase the police budget because they're having a rough go of it. Right. And it'd be easy to think that somehow this was all like just happened to fall this way, that none of this is like, that this isn't a pattern or a way things work. And it actually is it's a mini pattern of the larger pattern of the move towards fascism.
Yes, I like that. A mini pattern.
A mini pattern.
It's tiny little pattern.
I want to say microcosm, but microcosm is too big of a term.
Yeah.
And fascism isn't this thing where you have evil people lurking in the shadows that are waiting to tap into the quiet racist who are just waiting for their moment to shine. Fascism is what happens when neoliberalism is threatened enough, and you have to figure out someone to blame that isn't the heart of neoliberalism. So the white liberal people, when they feel threatened enough to have an outsider be a scapegoat, fascism is what happens.
Yeah. So to also orient us to a very particular story that happened yesterday that kind of got us going. And first, I just want to pause and say hi to everybody that's saying hi to us.
Good morning.
And so we appreciate you all being here. And Ellen, it's great to see you commenting. Haven't seen you for a while.
Yep. CK.
You've been prisoner to the raccoons. They finally made it to Indiana and tied you up. Something.
Leah writes that when we get an episode 98, it should be the Betty White episode. It's too much to say.
Yeah. I don't know enough about Betty White to do a whole episode on her, but
Kathleen says $100 for episode 100 will work for her. If we get 100 people to each give $100, what does that mean?
Oh my gosh.
That would pay for
that would be awesome. That would pay for transmission forever. It would just be
our beer and caviar budget definitely would get flushed.
Yeah. The give your priest a beer day forever. Like for the rest of our lives, we could buy beer and give your priest a beer today. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the particular thing that happened yesterday, and this is actually a big story. I don't know if it will become a big story, but it's a big deal. So some of you may remember that a while back, we had Max Wolpert and Sarah Hubbard on the episode to talk about the protests that were going on in Aurora. in response to the Elijah McClain killing. And this was unbelievably, I mean, all these killings are sad and tragic, but to inject this tiny little guy with 500 milligrams of ketamine and kill him in this way is so repulsive. So there were all these protests in Aurora in Colorado, and they happened. Wasn't much response. The cops that killed him are still on the force. They haven't been charged. One of them was fired. But suddenly yesterday, they're really kind of out of the blue. There were these sweeps where a number of the organizers of these protests were arrested, including one guy who was arrested at his house, and there was a SWAT team and a tank that they brought to his house to arrest him. Another guy was picked up in the Home Depot parking lot, and they were charged with multiple felony charges. So potentially decades in prison, including, things like kidnapping, because of course, when there were these protests outside of the police station, all these police were prisoners in the police station. Apparently. And, so, yeah. And, so basically, this is an attempt by the state to terrorize anybody that wants to be involved with peaceful protest.
Some of these charges, they're always fascinating. Some of these charges, like conspiracy to incite a riot.
Right.
It's like you could pretty much use that for anyone who happened to be there. So these are the sort of broad felonies that police can just apply when they feel like it.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is part of a pattern that we're starting to see all across the country, right? William Barr wants to bring charges against the mayor of Seattle. Charges are being brought against protesters all over, and this is part of the pushback by the state to suppress what really has been one of the largest set of uprisings and protests in the United States in decades. And so, the state responds to this not by necessarily listening to the protests, but by applying a whole set of tools to not only try to suppress protest, but also, as you're talking about, Mark, to turn kind of the average person against the movement. And this is not something that happens randomly. This is very, very clear. And when we talked last time about the whole numbness of numbers, we talked about the fact that the politicians will get out there and talk about, the one person that lost their business, which, is sad, right? I mean, it is. It's sad. And so that will get all these people saying, oh, yeah, these protests are so terrible. They're doing these terrible things to the average person, as if the government keeping millions of people in dereliction and poverty and not giving them health care is not doing terrible things to people. But that's lots of people, right? And that's that numbness of numbers. So I think we have to be really aware of what's going on. I think we have to be kind of smarter than people often are in response to this, and basically not fall for a lot of this bullshit. Yeah.
Just a few comments. Ellen writes, well, on the topic of fascism and conspiracy, apparently QAnon is recycled from a set of Nazi stories back pre-World War II. Yeah, so the Protocols of the Elders of Zion kind of stuff. Like QAnon is rehashed. Instead of Jews like drinking the blood of white babies for power, it's liberal cannibals. Yeah. It's the same, but like the scapegoat is like just Jewish, like it's just kind of broadened out, but you still have scary Jews in the mix there too. But then you have maybe some Muslims and some far left winger people in the mix too.
Yeah.
Mark writes, conspiracy to incite a riot sounds like a charge that should be leveled against, I don't know what Leo's means, that commit human rights violations, in my opinion. Hunger Games are next.
Well, and what's interesting, CK, about that comment is, we watch something like the Hunger Games and we think, oh, it's the usual thing, right? Oh, that could never happen. I would never participate in that. And we really do not look carefully enough at the human's ability to be hoodwinked into something. Leo is a law enforcement officer.
Okay. Popo. Yeah. So the police incite riots. I mean, this is people. I want people to understand this. Like, maybe I'm some sort of left-wing kook who's so deluded, but I think Dan's been in a lot of protests. I've been. Everything starts with the police escalating stuff because that makes it look like they're the good guys, and then they can feel legitimate in using all their military equipment.
Yeah.
They don't just sit there and drink coffee and wait for things to blow over.
And again, and part of the problem is, right, if you're a white person in the suburb or a wealthy white person in a city who has never been to a protest, who might be marginally sympathetic, you're either you have or you're tolerating a Black Lives Matter sign on your perfectly manicured lawn. You don't really know what happens at these protests, right? And so you're reading the paper and you're looking at this, and you might say, oh yeah, it looks like these terrible people are doing this thing. I like the police. They're nice to me. My brother's a policeman. My cousin's a policeman. I can't believe that the state would start these problems. And so you're very easily duped. And Max is listening, so he chiming in here from Colorado.
Many of those arrested are part of an organization with socialism in its name. So lots of folks see them as bad guys by default. I'm sure there's a big contingent in this country that actually thinks being a socialist is itself a crime. I mean, this is where we get just to shift a little bit. So Donald Trump, he doesn't have the legal ability to do this, but basically wants to make it illegal to use the 1619 curriculum, which talks about how we have a racist slavery past. It's not nothing about that stuff that they've offered is like mind-blowingly new. It's just the stuff that many of us kind of who've looked into it at all know. And saying we should tell kids about our past. And Donald Trump thinks this is anti-patriotic and wants to ban it. He also says that it's curriculum like this that caused the protests to begin with, and that we should replace it with a American patriot curriculum. Now, just to unpack that a little bit, yes, it's nefarious because he wants to do propaganda. But to me, the more insidious thing is within a fascist framework, you have to blame somebody for your social ills. Mm-hmm. And it starts with blaming outsiders. So in Nazis, it's the communists. But then it's also those sympathetic to communism within our midst that we have to reject from who is us, right? So Jews are treated this way, but then anyone who's sympathetic. So right now you have this. It's always been the case in conservative politics to vilify the left as being un-American. This is new. This is not new. What is kind of newish is the lengths to which you see the police and the administration trying to activate, make this actively illegal. We've always had attempts at this, but it seems like there's an acceleration. So it started Standing Rock protests, recent protests, attempts to pass legislation to make it illegal to protest. Mm-hmm. Some of that stuck in some places, sometimes some places it didn't. Now, across the board, from the police all the way up, attempts to vilify and criminalize this.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't end well.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's, Max is right. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the people who were arrested are part of this organization with socialism in its name. And so what that is going to do when they hear, okay, let's go down to City Hall and protest, and they're going to do that tomorrow to the government center in Denver, people are like, well, I'm not socialist, so maybe I won't go. Right. And that really, this is what the intention is, right? It's divide and conquer. It's dilute people power. I mean, this has been going on, right? Machiavelli has been going on forever. The upper class understand this.
Mm-hmm.
There's more of us than there are of them. If it's, all of us together, we win. But if we can divide everybody up, then it is very, very easy for them to just allow things to peter out and for them to stay in power. And so, yes, it's not at all a coincidence that they're targeting these socialist groups. All right, we got some great comments coming in, so we should get back to that.
Mark writes, also not unconvinced that law enforcement officers escalate situations in order to justify hazard pay and overtime, self-interested actions to pad their paychecks.
Mm-hmm.
Could be.
We got one comment here. From Medina. I'm not sure.
I cannot tell what that's a response to. Yeah, if you could say more, that'd be helpful.
That'd be great.
Sometimes we lose the flow of comments with what we're saying. Ellen writes, to become a citizen for immigration, you have to swear you are not a socialist or an anarchist. Yep. Julia writes, I did oral histories with underground resistance workers and other Holocaust survivors around Europe, Scandinavia, Soviet Union, and Israel in 1979. Incremental steps of fascism rising now resonate with their stories told to me. Have been for several years, actually.
Yeah, and a lot of folks have been writing about that, saying that people who are immigrants who are here, who fled fascist states, are like, hey guys, like, wake up! This is what happened in my country.
Sorry, it was an accidental post. Haven't finished my thought. Well, that's okay. I look forward to hear your thoughts. Yes. Sarah writes, unfortunately, Dump's view on 1619 mirrors what is already in many people's heads. Yeah, he's not saying anything that I haven't thought at one point in my life. Right. It's just he's operationalizing it. He's making it instead of something impolite.
Yeah. And of course, what's kind of hilarious to me, right, about this is that you don't need to create a fake propaganda history curriculum. Like, that's already what's in place. Like, you don't. I mean, that's why they made the 1619 Project, was because what is already in place is this highly mythological, patriarchal curriculum. Now, I do think that one thing that's very important, and a guy who's this very cool independent activist and scholar talked about this a couple weeks ago on Facebook, is that I think one of the things that the left makes a mistake about is that we don't talk enough about the importance of freedom, and we sort of cede that to the right. Yes. And so, fascism uses the word freedom to inspire people and cloak fascism. And so, to me, I think we need to reclaim that language a lot more and say that the way you get to freedom, to real freedom for everybody, is about telling the truth about history and about who we are and transforming that. Right. And so I do think that this is a real strategic error. And I think we need to get a lot better at this and saying that, what we want is freedom. And what we have had and what we continue to have, especially from the point of view of anyone, that is not cis and white, is not freedom.
I think that's a great point, and it reveals part of the problem of generic neoliberalism, which is even the way they present it themselves is that if you leave people to their own devices too much, they'll exploit. So we need to have the state step in to restrain and to police bad behavior. So the way you interpret that, and the way you interpret that, especially if you're not part of the elite and you're a conservative, is the left is always trying to control us because they don't trust us.
Right.
And you know what? That's kind of true. This is where, like, I tend towards anarchism, and anarchists are leftists who also believe in freedom. And in the way we and a lot of socialists in general talk about this is actually the laws in place already are restraining us already because it marshals resources and benefits to a few. And in order for us to be free, we need to undo that. It's a different way of thinking about it, but like it's something that the generic left in this country doesn't do well. Yeah, so that's why we always think when we think of socialism, we think it's just fire trucks and like restraining corporate people, and we don't talk about real democracy.
Yeah. So Kathleen's got a great comment along these lines.
I'm thinking about the word socialism and why it upsets people so much. We are social beings. It seems to me that we should want what is best for the group as a whole, not just the ones at the top.
Yeah, God, what a socialist.
Pinko.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem, right? We don't have a group ethic and ethos in America. And so, yeah, I mean, people read that and they're like, I don't care about anybody else. It's all about me. Like a couple days ago, I was driving around in my Prius. This was in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And this guy in this huge old truck that is like spewing black smoke everywhere comes zooming by, breaking the speed limit, spewing his black smoke everywhere. On the back of his truck, there's a bumper sticker that says, "Fuck you and your Prius." And, basically, what?
Did that hurt your heart?
No, I crashed into him.
Good. You jumped up on it and started smashing him.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, that sums it up right there, right? It's like, I want to drive my big truck. I want to pollute the world. I want to tell anybody else that cares about the environment to go fuck themselves. And, I'm good. Like, that's all I need. So, all right, let's keep rolling here.
Gus writes, a friend of mine was suggesting that we start referring to this kind of patriotic propaganda as political correctness.
That would be funny. Yeah, that'd be good.
Series writes, also, a lot of white people don't really respect the First Amendment. They want the rights in that amendment for only themselves without being challenged. Classic narcissism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Medina's enjoying real freedom comes from telling the truth.
Thank you.
Catherine writes, Dump's view of basic American history and the 1619 Project, etc., has many academic counterparts, some of which I critiqued in my dissertation. In my experience, a bland, white silence version of his proposed Patriot curriculum is the default in the U.S., even at supposedly liberal institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
My son goes to one of the most progressive schools in progressive South Minneapolis. And I remember going to one of their pageants they had, and they had people dressed up like pilgrims and Indians having the first Thanksgiving. So it's really weird seeing a Somali kid wearing an Indian headdress. And I'm like, I don't know who to critique right now. So, but like, it's like, that's clearly dumb. You shouldn't be doing that. I'm hopefully they don't do anymore, because that was kind of frustrating to see that. But that stuff is still the default, this sort of like glazing the past. We talk about slavery as a bad thing in the past, but we don't really talk. You have to get in this special classes with edgy teachers in high school before you even start talking about how that stuff still influences our society in a big way.
Yeah, or a friend of mine, I don't know complete permission to share this, but it's obviously public knowledge where he is, so I won't say who it is. But so it's a black man and his family, and his black daughter is entering high school and taking a world history. So it's a world history class at the beginning of the semester. So let's all guess what world history at the beginning of the semester starts with. Can you guess, Mark?
1776? No. What?
No, Renaissance Europe.
Okay. I do. There's too many Eurocentric sparking points to choose from.
It's like, so here's
when we
this
emerged from the Dark Ages and started to understanding the world, exploring it.
World history. So if you're a young black woman going into high school, and you are being told that world history starts with white Renaissance Europe. I mean, how obscene is that? It's just unbelievable.
I mean, everything outside of Europe at that point was like barbaric and backwards, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
That must be the truth.
All right, let's keep rolling.
Gus writes, I think we also need to talk about freedom in a bigger way as well. We need to talk about freedom from something the right already does, but also freedom for. What are you free to do? The right doesn't answer that question. No, it's the answer of what we're supposed to be for is always answered in mythic terms, right? Yeah. For liberty, God and country, like your best life now BS without any, and it always skews individualistic, which is compelling because then you feel like if you could have enough of a level playing field, you could be the billionaire that you see inside of yourself. And the fact that it isn't level, it's unequal. It's because these welfare queens and people of color and their affirmative action, and then, these immigrants are taking what's yours, so you don't get a fair shake at getting ahead.
Yeah.
Piling on to the topic of freedom. We need to emphasize the distinction between freedom to and freedom from. This is again echoing what Gus says.
Yeah.
In my opinion, left anarchists are strong on both and recognizing the needs for both, depending on what the flavor of freedom is, either to or from. Now, just so people know, I don't want to just give a commercial to anarchism. It's just in leftist, there are ideologies that exist outside of neoliberalism that are not just 16-year-olds reading about in their basements. Deep thought about this stuff that Americans, we tend to be really ignorant about world history, political ideologies. And so different versions of people on the left, we've been arguing for hundreds of years now about how to balance social needs and individual freedoms in ways that Americans it's like we're stuck in this 101 level conversation.
Yeah. And even the basic kind of ignorance and self-reflection of the amount of true freedom that we have relative to other developed countries, many of which are democratic socialists, right? I mean, for example, many people are not free to quit their shitty job because they need the health care.
Yeah.
Right? If you have socialized medicine, you get whatever job you want. Right? You leave your job and you don't risk not being able to go to the hospital, right? We are not free to get educated anymore. Our educational system used to be much more socialist, i.e. it was paid for by the state. That's not happening anymore. We're not free for that. So even our individual freedom in this country is paltry compared to a lot of other places, and we don't even recognize that. It's very sad.
Yeah, right. Cornel West got Tucker Carlson to agree to the basics of socialism. Worth a watch. I have not seen that.
Okay.
I will look into it.
That'll be fun.
Bo writes, recommended resources for your understanding of anarchism and how it can improve society. This is a little old school. But my go-to classic is The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin, because he's Russian anarchist. But there's all kinds of stuff out there.
Including some books by yours truly, Mark Van Steenwyk.
Yeah. Mine doesn't really get into how you can organize a society. It's more of a Christian understanding of anarchism, but there's a lot of stuff out there.
Improve society.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can check out my stuff if you want a Christian spin on it. But generally, Peter Kropotkin's stuff is good. It's kind of foundational. But then if you go to like PK Press or AK Press, PM Press or AK Press and search for like Anarchism 101, there'll probably be a primer that's decent. They come out with good stuff. Mm-hmm. Sean writes, this was said in another live feed I caught recently. Quote, "We will never be a more perfect union until we have addressed what we have done as a union." I think that's right. Yeah. Catherine says, "I made a game while researching of skimming histories of the Midwest by white academics and counting how many sentences directly mentioned colonialism. It was usually one or two vague sentences." Yes. Max writes, "Look at the difference in response to BLM protesters versus anti-mask protesters who are heavily armed, businesses refusing service to people for being gay versus refusing service to people who are not wearing masks."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we've mentioned this before, right? I mean, none of these people that have occupied state capitals, that have disrupted meetings, they haven't been pepper sprayed, they haven't been arrested, they haven't been, they're like, "Oh, please come in. Can we give you another pumpkin spice latte?"
Why you said
Oh, this is good. Max is setting us straight on history.
Ramses II was a 15th century Flemish painter. The pyramids were built by Galileo. That's true.
He went to public school. That's what you get.
Ellen writes, "I'd like to hear your thoughts on 45 telling the truth, quote, child abuse. I was affected, sure, by learning truthful history. How do we flip that piece of his script?" That's weird. Like this idea of telling children problematic, difficult things about their society as a form of abuse. I don't know. Yeah. Like this is the idea that if you need to tell your kid, it's bizarre that the same people who agree with that are also the ones that are upset at getting participation trophies, right? So right. So we want them to earn through struggle their own success, but we can't tell the truth about any way that's upsetting about how our society got here through cruel competition and oppression. So it's like we just want to make sure our kids only feel successful. It's just weird.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'd say to that, Ellen, is that my experience is that kids that learn the truth about history and learn how to work and process with that seem to actually be much more awake, aware, positive citizens than kids who don't. So, yeah, I just think it's nonsense. All right, we're past time, so let's try to blaze through.
Sure. Catherine writes, "There are obviously exceptions, but it's still amazing how easy it is to get work published that doesn't acknowledge fundamental truths of our history."
Yeah.
Ellen writes, this is accurate, "The right is always tokenizing children. Children and the unborn are the great foils of conservative thought. That's why," Julia writes, "that's why Americans don't vote for fair taxes. We don't want to pay taxes on the mythological millions anyone can obtain in the American dream."
Yeah, exactly.
Mark has a link here, theanarchistlibrary.org. Apparently on theanarchistlibrary.org, you can read Peter Kropotkin's The Conquest of Bread. It's good. Mm-hmm. Jacques Lowe for some more Christian anarchism background.
Yeah. And we don't have to put up Ed's comments.
Pumpkin spice latte is a fashion. You're buying into the brainwashing.
Yeah,
propaganda. Sarah's writes, "He said that? Oh my God, that fucker." Who said what?
Trump said about kids.
Oh, yeah.
Child abuse, I think is what she's referring to.
You could be saying that about Trump every day for all kinds of things.
Right, for all kinds of things.
But liberals love it. I mean, I want to believe that I'm really far left anarchist, socialist. And I love pumpkin spice.
There we go.
I'm feeling so oppressed right now.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for all the great comments. Really appreciate it. And if you're in Colorado and you can get down to the Capitol tomorrow, do that. For everybody that's going to be there, stay safe. And let's keep following that story and putting that out there. And we'll see you all on Monday.
See you Monday, everybody.
Bye.